Hi. So if you're tuning in today, it's probably because you've got tight hamstrings. And no matter how much stretching you do, it's not making any difference at all. Don't worry, you are definitely not alone. The reason the stretching isn't making a difference is because it's not actually your hamstrings that are the cause of your problems. It's your posture. So we spend so much of our day seated, either at a desk, in the car, on the bike, on the rower, okay? And in this seated position, what's happening is the muscles on the front of our hips, our hip flexors, are becoming very short and tight. And this is pulling our pelvis forwards, okay? So it's making our pelvis go into what we call anterior tilt. If our pelvis is getting tugged forwards, this is going to have an effect on the muscles at the back of our pelvis, okay? So what we've got are the hamstrings, okay, backs of our thighs. They attach to our sit bones, which are at the base of our pelvis. So if the front of my pelvis gets pulled forwards, as a knock-on effect, okay, my sit bones are going to get tugged upwards, which is therefore going to pull on my hamstrings, making them long, okay, and creating tension in them. And it's create this tension that you feel as tightness, okay? So your hamstrings are actually long and weak. Also to note, okay, if our pelvis is in that anterior tilt position, it's putting a lot of strain on the muscles of our lower back, which becomes short. And at the same time, the muscles on the front of our core become long and weak. So in order to correct this posture, what we actually need to do, okay, is release the front of our hips to unload the pelvis. We need to strengthen our hamstrings and glutes, okay, and third step, we need to strengthen the front of our core, okay, our transverse abs and our abdominals, which will really help stop that rib cage flaring out, okay? So if you might notice if you've got anterior tilt, when you stand, you sort of find that your belly sticks out a little bit, okay? So the rib cage flares. So by strengthening the front of the core and the abs, which attach to the bottom of the ribs, it will help correct that. So step number one is unloading the pelvis by opening up the front of the hips. So we need to really stretch our hip flexors, because if the muscles at the front of the hips are tight, that is going to stop the muscles on the back from working. So no matter how much you try and strengthen those glutes and hamstrings, it just won't make a difference. So it's really important that you do this one first. So my favourite stretch, okay, for stretching off the front of the hips is the couch stretch. So all you need is either a chair or a sofa or a wall, okay? And what you're going to do, you're going to place your foot on the wall or the chair or whatever you're using, okay? And then, now most people, when they try and stretch their hips and quads, will just go like that, okay? Now that is not having any effect on the fronts of my thighs at all, or not much at all. In order to really get a good stretch at the front of your hips, what we need to do is to sit up or kneel up nice and tall. You then squeeze the bum of the back leg, okay? Now if I contract the muscle at the back of my hip, what that's going to do is allow the muscles on the front of my hip to relax. So I squeeze my bum, and now straight away I can feel a greater stretch down the front of my thigh. What I'm then going to do is lift up my arms to try and create space between my ribs and my hips, because our hip flexors go all the way up and actually attach to our lower back. So we want to try and stretch the whole of the muscle out. And in order to do that, we're going to reach up. You are then going to flex or side bend and then rotate away, whilst keeping that bum muscle engaged all the time. Okay, and what you're going to do, you're going to hold that stretch for 10 seconds. Try and relax. Use your breath. You're then gonna relax and then try and take the stretch a little bit further and hold it for another 10 seconds. So can you see the difference? Okay, if I do it from the side, you'll be able to see the way I'm using my bum, okay, to increase the stretch at the front of my hips. So that is what I'm doing, okay, as opposed to that. That, I'm not getting much stretch at all, okay, but if I squeeze my bum, keep my back nice and flat, and then reach up, I'm getting a lot greater stretch through the front of the hip. So 2 lots of 10 seconds on both legs, step number 1. So having opened up the front of your hips, the next step is to strengthen the muscles on the back, the glutes and the hamstrings. And the best exercise to do that, I reckon, is the Romanian deadlift. So if you're not used to deadlifting, what I recommend is starting with 1 kettlebell or a dumbbell, and then progressing to 2, and then start loading up a bar. So the Romanian deadlift is a hip hinge. So what you'll notice is my knees don't travel forwards, okay? My weight is evenly distributed through my feet, okay? But I'm keeping the weight on in my heels, because what we're trying to do is really emphasize glutes, hamstrings, and the back muscles. So my shoulders stay back and down. What I don't want to do as I hinge up forwards, or hinge backwards, is for my shoulders to roll forwards. So I've really got to think about using my back muscles and all the muscles on the underside of my shoulder blade, okay, my lower traps, to keep my shoulder blades down, rather than letting them roll forwards. If I let them roll forwards, my spine will curve, and then you're really going to put your lower back in danger, okay? So what I'm doing is I'm going to hinge at the hip, I'm loading my glutes and hamstrings by lengthening them, and then I'm pulling myself up with my glutes and hamstrings, keeping my back flat all the time. So I'm pulling myself up, slide my bum back, loading through the glutes and hamstrings, keeping weight evenly distributed through my feet. So with the feet, what I always recommend, okay, is thinking of a tripod. So you've got weight through the base of the big toe, the little toe, and the heel. Try and maintain that even weight distribution, okay, and that will ensure that all the muscles of the leg and the hip engage optimally. Because what you might find, if your glutes and hamstrings are weak, you might actually find that you have a tendency to let your weight go into the front of your feet more, okay, which will engage the quads. Okay, so if you are sort of quad dominant, very much make sure that you keep your weight on the heel as well, okay, to keep those glutes and hamstrings engaged. So third and final exercise is strengthening the front of the core. There are obviously loads of ways you can do this, but one of my favourite is the dead bug. So what you're going to do is lie on the floor. Now if I just lie on the floor, okay, and just relax, I should have a natural curve in my lower back, okay, and I can probably fit my hand under that. However, what we want to do is to drive our lower back into the floor so there's no gap. So I want to make sure throughout this exercise that my lower back stays on the floor, okay? And I'm not going to let my ribs or lower back lift off the floor. Now, the way I do that is by engaging my abdominals. So I'm going to think about drawing my belly button into the spine, okay? And as I do that, all I'm going to do is lift my legs up. I'm then going to take my arms up, okay, and for the dead bug, keeping that belly button drawn into the spine, making sure that my spine doesn't extend and lift off the floor, okay. All I'm going to do is extend my arm whilst lengthening the opposite leg. But there's no movement in my body as I do that. So extend one leg, extend opposite arm. Now, if that is too much, okay, and you find your spine lifting, what you can do is, to start with, place the hands on the floor, okay, relax the shoulders so the back muscles are engaged, because the back muscles are an important part of your core, okay, and then belly button into the spine, keep that belly button into the spine, keep lower back on the floor, and you can just do legs only, but just work to whatever level you can whilst maintaining the back on the floor, okay? If you get to there and your back starts lifting, then don't go beyond it, okay? Because those muscles are just not strong enough and they're just switching off. So work within your own sort of limits. If you want to increase the difficulty of the exercise, what you can do is actually use a Swiss ball, okay? And exactly the same exercise. However, with the Swiss ball, all we're going to do, okay, imprint again. So I'm driving my lower back into the floor. And then what I'm going to do is squeeze that Swiss ball, okay, by pulling my knees towards me and pushing with my hands on the ball, so my shoulders are relaxed all the time, back muscles, everything's squeezing. You can tell by the tone of my voice that actually that is quite an effort. And then if you want to do the dead bug, again, it is opposite arm, opposite leg, but there's no movement in that ball. So I'm pushing with my right hand, pulling with my left knee, but engaging that core all the time. So 3 easy steps for you to help improve your posture, okay, which will then help release the tension in those hamstrings so they don't feel so tight anymore. So open up the front of your hips, strengthen the glutes and hamstrings, and then strengthen the front of the core. Just one point to bear in mind is if your glutes are lazy, what will happen is your hamstrings will pick up the slack, okay? So they'll become tight because they're overworked. So if you feel that your pelvis is kind of in a neutral position anyway, and that you're not in anterior tilt, and your hamstrings are still tight, what I would look to do is to just check out your glutes, okay? And if they are a bit lazy and you are quad dominant, it is very likely that your hamstrings are just overworking because of that, okay? So your goal, or what you need to do is steps 1 and 2 still, okay? You still need to open up the front of your hips, and you still need to strengthen those glutes with the Romanian deadlifts. But if you're doing that, just pay more attention to those glutes and make sure you can feel those fire before your hamstrings, because the glutes have to fire before the hamstrings. Otherwise, the hamstrings will get overworked and tight. So I hope this has been of help to you. If you have got any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. And I plan to do more sort of videos in the future. So if there are any sort of issues that you'd like me to cover, then just send me a message and I will do it for you. Take care and speak to you soon. Bye.